bugging him for 3 years.
Nisswa Lake.
Okay, I'd like to open up the Public Works Committee meeting for Wednesday, August 25th, 2021. And let's see, today we are beginning at 6 o'clock. And so on the agenda here, we have first is the open forum. If there's anybody who would like to talk or to offer anything that's not on the schedule, you're welcome to do so. Okay. Not seeing anyone, then I'd like to go ahead with number 2. We're looking at the road standard review and discussion. So I guess that would be with you, Tom.
So you have a sheet in your packet. Joe and I worked on last week, come up with, we reviewed our current public road standard, and we put together 3 sections for different use roads. You'll notice one's for residential. There's a residential road typical section. That would be something you're going to find in a typical development that we're looking at around town. And then we have a commercial road typical section. This might be something similar to what we will be considering when we look at Schaefer's plat when that comes up. And then there's a commercial road section with trail added to it that isn't separated. This will be a little different than like the Hazelwood trail where it's separated by there's a buffer. There has been some desire to have enough room on our roadways for a trail, even if it isn't separated. So these are the 3 sections that we are proposing, and what we're hoping to do is to have a road standard, no longer a public or a private road standard, just a road standard, and this would be the basis for that. Anything that's unusual about, say, a development or some kind of a construction project, if they wanted to vary from this, they would have to ask for that and justify why, and then this committee would either recommend it or not recommend it to the city council.
Okay.
Is this road standard in effect right now?
It is not. So, well, we have something very similar in effect for our public roads. This will supersede that if it's voted on by the city council and approved. I expect it will be. It's very similar to what we have now. We actually have simplified it some. We used to call it rural sections and urban sections. We simplified that a little bit by referring to it as residential or commercial.
So who is going to differentiate between curb and gutter, say, for instance, and just a regular street? How will you do that? Will the city determine that, or what?
What'll happen is the developer will have some engineering involved with it to begin with. And if, say, they're doing a housing development, they'll look at this residential road section and there's no curb and gutter really required there. However, if there are steep grades or some other reason why curb and gutter should be added, we'll be looking for that, and we'll probably make that recommendation a requirement on an as needed basis. We didn't want to get quite that detailed with it. We wanted to leave it as a typical section and not an absolute.
Yeah. But the city will be able to recommend.
Yes.
Yeah.
So what we were shooting for is to have one page kind of like this that I could hand to anybody coming in looking to build a road in the city. And this is what you need. If you need to vary from it, let us know as soon as possible. We would get with Joe, find out if there's any reason to vary from it, like add the curb like we were just talking about, or something needs to be done differently. And then we try to get them to incorporate that into their plans as early as possible. So, you know, I think we've all kind of talked here that we've had a lot of issues with roads that have been built in the past, oh, say 20 or 30 years that they kept the road private, so they didn't have to meet the city's road standard. And years later, after the developers left, the homeowners, sometimes the properties change hands even a couple times, and the road starts to fail, and they come in here wanting the city to do something about it. Well, our hands are kind of tied because it was never built to the city road standard.
Mhm.
So how are you going to handle that now?
So the way this is now is if you want to build a private road, you're building it to the same standard. So there really shouldn't be much of a reason for them to want to have a private road with this, because they have to meet the same standard either way. It's to the benefit of the people they're selling the home to have the city maintain them. You're paying property taxes for plowing and crack filling. You know, it's based on value. Yeah, and there's not a lot of difference in the value of a private road home versus a public road home. So in this scenario, they should have no equal weight. I would think most homeowners would prefer this scenario. Where we would allow, I think, for private roads would be in cases where it's a gated community, or something like Grandview where it's a part of a resort, or some big commercial entity that's going to be around for years to take care of their own maintenance.
I would think the city would want to be able to specify what type of road. Not in the private, I'm not talking about Grandview and things like that, but I mean in a normal case. Isn't that usually the way it's done?
I know the county was having trouble with this too. Developers bringing in private roads, and either they're changing the thicknesses of the road, or they don't want to put in those wide right of ways. So the county, I think, is looking to do something very similar to this, where they just have a road standard and that's what they have to hit. So I haven't gotten an update on that. If you remember, I think it was 2 meetings ago, I provided you with an article out of the Dispatch. It was talking about that very issue that the county is dealing with, pretty much the same issue we are. So,
But if I understand you right, the developer would still have the choice.
they could, I don't know why they would opt for private, because they're gonna have to build it to the same standard.
So why not just make them do it to start with?
You know, we could do that, and that's certainly something you could suggest. I left it open more for discussion purposes than anything.
I think this issue comes up in our next agenda item, doesn't it?
I think it does.
It will, yes.
Yeah.
And it affects, you know, the Bass Lake Road development we were looking at too. Although I promised we would not discuss Bass Lake Road here, so I'm gonna leave that out of our discussion as much as possible. But it'll affect other developments that are coming forward too, that we've heard some rumblings about. And even if we didn't have any going on, I think this is something we would have been looking at. I've had numerous inquiries from people who live on private roads now that they wish were public. And some of them were done, like I said, 30 years ago when none of us were involved. And so when I have to tell them what's involved to make it a city street, you know, there's a petition. They have to bring the road up to the city's specs at their cost. And even then, the city council may not accept it because they've been getting the tax revenue without providing the maintenance. So there's no benefit to the city to take over roads that are private once they've been established that way.
But what I'm hearing here is that the suggestion is that it's not just a standard, that we will be making this for both public and private. I mean, this is what it shall be.
This is how roads will be built. It's no different than we have setbacks in the city. You know, those apply to private and public projects. This will also be the same thing. The standard is the standard, no matter how you're building it.
What Bill was saying was that this is optional. The standard would be the same, but some
being private.
being private.
Remaining private, which really makes no sense because then at that point, what they're agreeing to is to provide maintenance, or they're sentencing the
Mhm.
people who are going to be buying those homes to providing the maintenance. Either way, there's no benefit to them anymore because
Right.
where
They're
they
gonna
were
have to
getting a
build
benefit
it.
before is they could put in a road that was much cheaper to build. Or it allowed them to
Mhm.
vary from what we would offer to either add homes or change the layout in some way that was beneficial to them that saved them money when they were developing. So,
Well, I just question whether you even need private
Right.
at this point.
Where would a private road come into play?
Was there saying someplace like a Grandview Lodge
Well,
or,
that,
Yeah,
that,
resort
something like that.
area.
but if we take away the financial incentive from the developer to put in a cheap road, that down the roads.
Right.
Down the road will fail. And then trying to get it up to snuff is gonna cost the homeowners a ton of money. We prevent the arguments later. I'm in favor of, but how much extra are we potentially looking at maintenance wise to take care of future roads that might go private that we wouldn't have to?
I don't know that it's gonna be a huge increase in maintenance, at least right away for us. Most of these are on our way. For instance, this development we're gonna be looking at here in a few minutes. Yeah, they're proposing that we maintain the main drive going through. It's just the roads branching off from that. Well, we're already there with a truck. It's just a few more minutes to finish the job. And I think the residents would appreciate.
Yeah.
When they see the city truck that he does the whole thing, not just the main road going through.
Now, when a development goes up, does the developer pay for the road if it is gonna be a public road? Does he pay for that initially?
So
Would
either
we
way,
have to pay
right
for it then?
now, if it's public or private, the developer pays
Okay.
to have it established to be.
So we don't take on any extra cost by doing it that way. Okay.
No, just the maintenance, so the crack filling, resurfacing down the road.
Sure.
But you do, by that time you have, the tax revenue because the homes are there.
Mhm.
It should be full at that time, I would think.
So just to recap it for myself, they're going to make it to the spec of the city requires for a residential road. And then they have a choice of making it, the developer has a choice of making it a private road, which makes no sense because then they have to take care of it all, the cracks and all that stuff. And we don't plow or anything with that. So they will all want to have us take care of it instead, right?
So I think to answer what seems to be the question here, I think what we could do is just default that everything is a public road and they would have to request that the road remain private for some reason. Right now, the only two reasons that I can see we would allow it is the resort situation we've talked about or a
Mhm.
gated community of some kind.
sure, they could request it like Grand.
Right. But it
Right.
defaults to a,
To have a default to the public road.
I like that.
Mhm.
So to kind of put things in a little bit in perspective, outside of Grandview, to the best of my knowledge, we've only added 2 significant developments to the city in the 15 years I've been here. And that's the development off of 18 that's currently being filled up, and then the Rusty Gibbons development off of Poplar Avenue. It's not like this is something that occurs a whole lot with the city. It is right now. We're at a very peak, obviously, for development, but a couple years from now, it'll probably go back to something a lot slower, I would think.
Any other discussion? Is there like a motion that we can put forward then?
I guess what I would look for is a recommendation of the city council to adopt the new standard as the road standard. Roads would be public unless a request is made that they remain private. And
So-
then. that
And this
have
would
to
be a
justified.
default as a standard.
I'll make that motion.
Is there a second?
Second,
Okay, so we're voting whether to accept this as the standard as shown here. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Carried.
Thank you. So moving on. We've alluded to it a little bit here. We have the plat for Pinewood Crossing. So the new standard we have just recommended would affect this, like I mentioned, the main road coming through, they call it Pinewood Drive on here. It has a 66-foot right of way, and I believe it would probably hit all of our requirements. But the two cul-de-sacs coming off don't show any kind of a right of way. Obviously, they're private, so I guess we would ask questions. I apologize. I need your name again. Alex Bear is here with Widseth. He's involved with the Pinewood Crossing development. If you wouldn't mind coming up, so if they got any questions, they can kind of ask. Maybe I should ask, do you have questions or?
I don't. I'm happy to answer questions. To introduce myself again, I'm Alex Bitter. I'm the civil engineer on this project with Widseth. So
Thank you.
happy to answer questions here.
What are all these little boxes? What kind of a residence are those?
So this will be a combination of single family homes and duplexes. Some will be rented, some will be owned. Just a combination of those. And I don't know the exact location on all those. Those are being worked out, but it's a combination of those two types of homes.
So is each property then has a box around it? Is that the property line then for
Correct.
that particular?
Correct. Yep.
So with these being private roads for the two cul-de-sacs, if we did enforce that 66-foot right of way, would those houses be able to stay where they're at, or are they gonna have to be pushed out?
So the trouble we ran into with this development is with the 50-foot setback from the property lines. And then if we ran a 66-foot right of way through the middle, that would drastically reduce, if not totally eliminate, most of the houses that would come through here.
It would.
So why is this set up without conventional properties? For that reason?
I believe so. That was part of the discussion with Chad Connor and the owner. That was how they wanted to get this set up. To try to have a higher density of homes in there, and property with this type of density is definitely not uncommon in the area. There's another development to the northwest of town that is very similar and actually has a higher density per acre.
They look like there's a lot of housing crammed into a small space. That's why. I guess.
We've been able to maintain at least 20 feet between each home. So there is, I mean, it's not metro spacing by any means. But yeah, they are close together, but they all have a minimum of 20 feet between each closest side.
So the Pinewood Drive does meet what we talked about. It does meet the 66-foot, but it's where you say private drive, that would be private then.
Yeah, so for the private portions, what we're proposing is having a 20-foot wide bituminous mat and then surmountable curb outside of that to direct stormwater to a regional basin for the development. So it's kind of one step above just a paved road that just sheet flows off and goes off into the surrounding area.
How long would you anticipate these roads lasting compared to if it was brought to the same standard as?
So we would still have the appropriate pavement section. We're proposing 5 inches of class 5 and 3.5 inches of bituminous. Now, when you're talking of, depending on how the developer maintains this road, you know, crack sealing, all that stuff prolongs the life of the road. If none of that is done, you know, in 20 years, it could need some pretty drastic maintenance. But if there's intermediate mill and inlays, stuff like that, it could prolong the life of that road for sure. But that's all on, if it does stay private, then it's up to the developer to maintain that, make sure that road will last.
Mark, is that something that we could require when it goes through this process with the city, require that the developer maintain it over a period of time? If it
I don't
stays
know.
private?
Can we require that as a city?
I'm not certain on that. Maybe, go ahead, Joe.
The planning will usually make up a developer's agreement. I'm assuming. And at that time, they could put that language in there that would state some kind of guarantee for the maintenance of years. That I think is the main problem, not only if they decrease the width of the roads. This one happens to be, will meet the standard. And with the curb, it exceeds the standard a little bit. On this one, it's the right of way that could be an issue, and then the maintenance. And what happens to that road in 20 years with the developer up and goes. So I think that the road, things can be worked into the developer's agreement to help that.
A lot of times they want to form an association, that's the developer's agreement.
Mhm.
It's been my experience that associations aren't always very solid.
Is there a cross section of that paving anywhere on these drawings?
So on sheet 5, we do have a paving section. We don't show a dimensioned typical section for the road that will be on there. But for right now, we just have it's medium duty bituminous paving section there in the center. And then off to the left of that, we have the curb detail that will be on there.
So in this present form here, that would not agree with what we were talking about just previously, right?
It will,
It will?
yes.
It doesn't look like it.
In what way?
The curb shape. And
Is there a standard curb type that the city is proposing?
I thought so.
So it's typical B618 or B612?
I don't know that we got into that detail on the curb. I know we're showing the typical curb that he just described, but we have allowed surmountable curb in other places in the city, public
Well-
streets.
Sorry. What we were doing was modeling just across the street, across 18. I don't recall that development's
Yeah, that's,
name, but that has the same
yeah.
surmountable curb and gutter. And what we would do is at the proposed driveways, and at least personally, what I like to see is when they drop that curb, so it's not just a bump. But yeah, so across the street, there's surmountable curb.
So how wide would this street be?
So this total width, so with the private roads, 20-foot mat, so 22, and then the W on these is, so it'd be a 22, 24, about 25 feet wide total, top of back of curb, back of curb to back of curb for the private roads.
So what does our standard show, Tom? I don't have it here.
So if you look at this, we're looking for 2 10-foot lanes. Now they're adding curb that we don't require for residential. So I think that's where the other 2 feet are coming from. that he's
Correct.
Suggesting.
Yeah, the surmountable curb is wider than a typical. It's about 2 feet wide or 2.5 feet from edge of flow line to back of curb.
So you're saying it'd be 24 feet with a curb in it? for the road?
25. about, yeah,
25,
yeah,
okay. Yeah, so it meets what we have on here.
Yeah.
So is it the right of way that is?
That's the right of way is the only thing that we would need to make it the public street standards. But if we were to put that right of way in there, we would more than likely lose homes in there. Just because, and that's too with the shape of the property. It's an oddly shaped property, so that's really limiting.
Are there any utilities in there at all?
So yeah, we will have sewer. All those homes will be connected to city sewer, and there will be a utility easement up there for the sanitary sewer. Homes will have, each lot will have its own well. And the intent is in the HOA that home, it'll be written in there that home owns that well. At least that's what we're proposing to the owner.
Each of these homes that are 20 feet apart have their own well?
Yeah.
Wow.
That's what we're proposing at this time, just for simplicity And for future maintenance, you know, if you have a community well and then there's one person that doesn't like the quality of the water. So just for simplicity, just for right now, have each home have its own well.
So
And that-
it appears that each one of these is square. And then the property line, I guess that's the property line around each one. Is that the way they would actually turn out? There's
No, so what we've
dimensions.
provided is just kind of the initial layout. Most of these will be slightly rectangular, 40 by 50, 40 by 60. But they should all fit in that boundary.
What is the size of that boundary?
Is that listed on that preliminary plat? That square should be listed on there.
I don't know.
What was the question?
Oh, it's 58 by 66. It's over on the far left side, right over here.
Oh, here we go. I
Yeah.
see it.
Yep. I don't have that sheet in front of me, so thank you for looking. at it.
There's a big one there if you want to refer to it.
Do you know the distance on the two? I think it's 2, 5, and 9. From the garage to the street, those are pretty short driveways.
So again, we've provided enough space in those driveways to fit one vehicle. So I think we tried to stay towards 24 feet or 25 feet. There may be some that get down to 20, but we've tried to make them as long as we could by pushing that home as far as we can to the back. But again, the shape of the property and that 50-foot setback limits some of those, but we tried to arrange them in a way that you could at least get a vehicle all the way in that driveway and not be in the garage. So.
I have a question for you, Tom. This Pine Haven Road, which it connects to there on the west side. I drove that the other day. I don't know exactly what's there, but there's no ditches, there's no grade. It just looks to me like some asphalt. I don't know what's underneath it, probably sand. Human nature being what it is, people that live here, when they're going down to downtown Nisswa, they're gonna go that way. It's shorter.
They might.
They will. And that road, the way it is right now, probably can handle those 3 or 4 or 5 houses there, and that's about it. So I was wondering what the city would do if they approve this thing, what the city would do to improve Pine Haven Road.
At this time, we don't have any plan to prove it, but it is a road that the asphalt is fairly weathered, I guess.
Yeah. There's no ditches or anything there.
Right.
Is
I'm
this
not
a,
sure what we would do with it. I'd have to talk about that and look at it.
this is a public road, right? Pine
Pine
Haven?
Haven is public, yes.
Yeah.
It's an older road and I'm not sure what the widths and stuff are too. I'd have to review that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have no idea what's under there.
Thickness wise, if it's like a lot of them that we've redone, you're lucky if in spots the pavement is an inch thick,
Yeah.
so. The thing that's kind of saved us on most of our roads is with the sand, with the base is usually pretty good.
Yeah.
And Tom, I also was wondering about this, the private road, you know, what in the worst case scenario it goes really bad and it needs extensive repair in the future. That would be, the residents would have to pay for that, right? The way it's written.
If it goes through with the private roads, it would be between them and developer.
Okay.
The city wouldn't enter into it at all,
And the developer would be long gone, and so it'd be just them.
depending on how the developer's agreement is written, but in most cases, there's an association. It's in the language for each home.
Mhm.
It's up to the homeowners to form that association.
And then make assessments or whatever to repair it. Okay.
for that? Their
I
house is
don't
on
know.
a private road.
I couldn't answer that. It would depend on the title work that's done.
Well, that would, I believe it would depend on the city's assessment policy. I mean, that driveway is directly accessing that public road.
No, I know, I'm saying if those
Right.
private roads were having to be redone, would house number one that's on a public road have to pay?
Since its driveway's not on it, I'd say no.
Really,
But again, that comes down to what council decides. I believe in that developer's agreement. But since it's directly accessing the public road, they could make a pretty good argument that they don't have to be a part of that assessment.
whoever's buying that home, if they're sharp when they go to buy it,
Yeah, certainly.
would try to get that taken out of any. But, these are probably gonna be targeted at the closest thing that we have to starter homes. Might be younger people, they may not realize that the difference between a public and a private road.
Is there a particular reason these lot sizes are not abutting up to each other? Like a typical lot?
There's an overall exterior property boundary. And these would be dedicated properties within that. That would be a fantastic question for Chad Connor. He was the one who worked with the owner on developing those. And I could certainly ask him. And
I mean, I know it doesn't have anything to do with what we're talking about now, but who maintains the grass and whatever else is in between these houses if it's outside of these boxes?
so that would be, the assumption is that would be part of that homeowners association agreement. They may hire somebody to mow the entire property. This property is also fairly heavily wooded, and the intent with that is to maintain as much as we can. For this project, I tried to make at least some usable area and have graded in kind of drainage ways to make sure we're directing water away from homes and to the basin. So the overall mowable area won't be that much. But again, that'll be in that HOA agreement.
Okay.
I assume. So
Yeah, they
I
don't
haven't
even
worked
own-
with Doug on that,
They don't even own the driveway.
right?
That's unusual.
On this number 3 here, what I'm reading here is you're asking if this should become public road. But what I understand is if it becomes public road, the way we're saying on this, that we propose, then the development won't go ahead.
Not as it's drawn, they'd have to show us how this 66-foot right of way would affect
Mhm.
the development.
So right with the 66-foot right of way and then the setback from that right of way, there's not a lot of room for homes in there. So we're just trying to come up with a way to utilize this property and create some homes.
Yeah, I think,
That's a 50-foot, oh, sorry.
I was just gonna say that, I understand maximizing the value, but I don't know that we want to vary from our standards just to maximize the number of homes in any one development either, so.
You say it couldn't be developed, or would it be developed with quite a few less homes? If you went to a 66-foot right away.
Yeah, I mean, then you're getting into potentially splitting that entire piece to have a more conventional lot. And then you're gonna have 1 or 2 homes off of that. And then on top of that, you have the city's force main going through there. That's already kind of thrown a wrench in laying out those homes. You don't want, even if we have just this road and then typical lots off of that, we can't have anything over that force main. So then we're, pretty much either the north side of the road and then, or much further south and have an easement over that force main. Which
Is that
there
the
are
force
easements.
main from the lift station there on the other
Correct.
side? On the other side of County Road 18?
Yep, just off of Broadleaf.
Where does that go then through the property?
So that comes from the east side of the property to the west and it's cut off. But right as it comes, there's, wonder if I can show it on a better.
Alex, could you show that up on there?
Certainly, yeah. So. Of course, lift station's right here.
Mhm.
Force main comes underneath the road. Force main comes down, follows this, goes underneath the road. Oh, I see. It dumps into this sanitary sewer manhole right here.
So why is that going to be a problem with other houses?
Well, we would just have to stay away from that. Can't put a house over that force main. So this is, this is really the closest we could do that. So if they were to do split, you'd have to have homes coming off this
Yeah.
way and then over here on the other side of that force. Just so if that force main needs to be ripped up, at that point, then you're cutting through people's driveways. Just not move the force main,
It's normal to have a sewer under there anyway.
but not underneath driveways. So if you have this main road coming through your driveways.
So you think it'd be a problem having a force main under the driveway?
Well, if that force main has to be replaced, you're ripping up.
It'd be better than ripping up the road.
Well, the city doesn't own the driveways, they have to have that easement through there, and it'd be a city-owned road at that point.
No. The city would have an easement for the force main,
Correct. Yep.
but they wouldn't own that property.
Right, but if it's going through, if there's, this is a public road and the force main is still over here and the driveway is going across there, yes, we still need to over that. But if some driveways there. Placing the driveways.
I think that's a moot point.
Mhm.
Yeah, I mean, that's getting far down the rabbit
Yeah.
hole on rearranging the site.
If you left the site just the way it was and added 8 feet each side on them private roads, how is that gonna affect anything?
Subdivision across the road is going gangbusters.
So adding,
If somebody
then that would
big
get you your
box
33
city-
feet, is that what you're saying?
Yeah,
So you'd have a setback beyond that right of way line. Correct, 20 feet beyond that?
yeah, you would, but now you're gonna be asking for a variance. Would that be a more reasonable variance to ask for? To make sure the road is standard for everything to get down there later for utilities, for sewer, water. Tom, what do you think of that? Is that something? You know, that setback is a issue, but
Yeah, I guess that, the planning commission would ultimately decide that, the setback.
How much would it go to, what would it happen if we did go with the standard that we had today? How many houses would be gone?
I don't know that number for sure. We could certainly try to lay that out if the owner would like to pursue that.
I think that would be good information to have.
Yeah,
I'm not in favor of carving out exceptions all over to our standard. Just unless it's a topography issue, a lot of those houses look like they could move further back from the road. There are a couple of them that are pointing at each other at an angle. You might lose one of them on the right side on the top, number 2. You might lose number 8. But I don't see how pushing out those other houses, I don't see how you would lose any more than 2 of them. But you might have a problem with number 10 on the left, on the north side. Because that would push it into the right of way of the road. But
I agree.
Well, it looks like the property lines, number 10.
Right.
Go over the right, over that setback already, it looks like.
Right, but if
The
you lost,
property line with the home.
if you
yeah.
lost number 8 and slid number 9 to the north, you could slide number 10 to the north as well. So I don't see how you would lose more than one on the north side of Pinewood and how you would lose more than number 2 on the south side of Pinewood.
So for behind 7, 8, and 9 there, that's where our stormwater basin is. So we need to have room on site to manage stormwater. That's why those are located where they're at. That stormwater basin is tucked right in there.
That, that north-south road pretty much follows a ridge, doesn't it, as I kind of looking in there from a distance?
To some extent, yeah, there's a decent amount of topography on the site. And we were able to get those roads in there. Be graded appropriately, have positive drainage away from homes. Capture as much water as we could to direct towards the stormwater basin.
Any more discussion on this? Is there, what is it that you really want us to do, Tom? Then does this say whether we should make it public or not?
I guess that would be the one way you could do it is you wouldn't make the recommendation with the private roads.
Mhm.
Want to see what it would look like with the public road standard applied.
Yep.
And you could table it, I guess, for this month and come back at it next month if you like. Or you could just say we won't recommend it and let the developer come back with a new drawing.
Mhm.
Two ways to look at it.
Do I have a,
I'd like to table it until Alex can come back and show us what it would be redesigned if it came up to our standard.
I think the tabling would probably be fair, being this is a new thing. It hasn't even gone through the city council yet. It's not approved,
yeah,
but I think it's likely to pass.
I agree with that.
yeah, you'll second that? Okay, so then let's take, the motion is to table this till the next meeting to see what it would be if we require this to be a city road, a residential road.
It would give us time, it would give the council a look at this, obviously, at their next meeting,
Mhm.
and we'll know if this is law.
Right.
Helps us.
Okay, so,
Comment,
Mhm.
you know, he is meeting the road standard that we want to do.
Right.
What he's not meeting is the right.
The right of way.
Okay, just, so-
I understand that. But
yeah,
of course, the right of way part of the standard.
no, I
Mhm.
I
I
get it.
guess, you know,
Yeah,
it's up
so
to
he's
him to
not meeting the
suggest a
road.
different right of way, or like you talked about the setback. If he can't meet this standard, if say the council passes it,
Mhm.
then he has to say, what does he need to make his development work? And then
Yep.
we can look at that. See if it makes sense. We can allow the variance or not allow the variance and make a recommendation to the planning commission from there.
Just so it's known, Alex, I do appreciate that you put you made your road compliant with ours, just minus the right of way. I appreciate that you didn't make that thinner.
Mhm.
Personally, I'd like to see this laid out in a more conventional manner. And just to see what actually occurs there as far as number of homes and so on. And then compare it to this.
Could you also ask him to provide an explanation of why he's breaking those up the way that he is?
Certainly.
I'm gonna bring back information on Pine Haven. Its right of way, the width of the road itself. I don't know that I'll be able to find the age of it, but I'll try.
Because that'll be a factor too, as far as
Yeah.
the city's concerned.
So I don't even know if we need to vote on that, just that we're tabling it. And then not make a recommendation to the council yet, but they can at least see what we're looking at here.
just for my own curiosity, I'm not real familiar with that area, but do you expect a lot of increased traffic through Pinewood if that becomes a cut through?
Well, that's what Dill's suggesting, that Pine Haven would become a more heavily traveled road, and there, I would say it could be, you know.
It'll be the short way into downtown.
That's what I was wondering.
So
So
I don't know how you would prevent that.
yeah,
Sure.
I guess that's something maybe,
human nature being
could
what
talk
it is,
about
instead
it.
of going out and around, they'll go the short way.
yeah.
And avoid all the traffic off of 18.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Short of speed bumps, I don't know how you would ever
Yeah.
Right.
make that not happen. And I don't like speed bumps.
Yeah, and they're hard on your plows.
Okay, well then, thank you very much.
Thank you,
And we'll look forward to this for the next time. Okay, then we'll go on to number 4 here. Engineering updates outside the agenda items.
Yes, I do. I did put something together for a small update. I didn't get it to you in time or get it to Tom either, so Tom's looking at me with a little surprise. Just to go through some of the projects that are being worked on right now for the Public Works, the Gull Lake Trail, which is really not a Public Works, but that's on hold right now for grant approval. The list station number 3, punch list, the change orders were approved, so we'll do a final application on that next when we get through with I think the venting too. And then wastewater treatment facility monthly meeting is tomorrow, 2:30. The architect walkthrough was completed. We'll need to do, we're going to be doing the testing on the generator September 8th. And we're waiting on the valves still for that, the switchover valves that they're going to put in. And what else we got here? All the MPCA did okay on the balancing. They have a request for some documentation that we need to provide them. And then we'll be waiting on the wear course for that, for the drive that goes in. We just started the water supply study, recycling center and the Hazelwood Drive extension. They're both on hold. That's an update. That's all I had. Unless you have any questions for me.
It looks good out there. Oh, the land.
Yeah, I think, I know I've talked to a couple people there. The grass is even coming up good in some spots where
Rain is perfectly
this type of
timed.
year, it's a tough one to have that happen, so.
What do they put in there that makes it grow so fast?
Yeah, really.
It'd be what's coming up.
Just, oof, it came right up.
Sell it as a hair tonic, huh?
I want that for my lawn. Okay, then, thank you, Tom. And then, Tom,
No, you can call me Joe.
Joe.
You can call him.
sorry, Joe.
It doesn't matter.
Anyway, thank you for that. And then number 5, any committee member concerns?
Looking at this, driving around this area a couple days ago, brought to mind this sidewalk that goes by the school, ends at the school. And there's no sidewalk from there down to the corner. And this has bothered me for quite some time. And I think that, well, for one thing, to go to the cemetery, for instance, the only way you can do that is go all the way around the bypass if you're walking.
Hmm.
Now, I realize there's no curb and gutter there, so one of the options I think that maybe the city should have the engineer look at is whether that street should be curbed and guttered now, or whether they put a sidewalk in on the other side of the ditch or whatever. But I really think that's long overdue. Now it goes nowhere.
There was originally when we took possession of Old 18, there was some talk then about the city might finish the trail up to the school, and it just hasn't been pursued. So we could certainly open that
Yeah.
topic up again, I guess.
Because it goes all the way around that, the bypass and up through town. There's a sidewalk all the way except for that one piece.
Yeah, we can put it on the agenda, I guess, and see where it goes.
Well, it just came to mind when I was driving that.
Yeah, I've thought about it, I guess, but it's not been a high priority and nobody's requested it from the community, so. I haven't-
Yeah, they have, I have.
No.
Bill has. So why don't
Well,
we,
there have been other people, people that walk,
Okay,
they realize that there's no sidewalk there.
okay.
And they have to go out in the street. That's a busy
why don't we
street.
make that an agenda item then?
I'll bring that up.
Okay, thank you.
That's all.
Anyone else?
We talked a little bit about the corner there,
Yes.
right out here.
Mhm.
Has that been brought up at all?
No, refresh my memory with.
Right at the post office, you know how you try to cross the road and this line of sight is really bad.
So anyway, Jenny and I have talked about that more than once, and same with, and Brittany too. I don't know if I've talked about it with Joe particularly, but I have talked about it with Mark and Helen in the past too, and we feel that it's probably part of a larger downtown project. And so we're not ready to do anything with that, but we agree there's a potential issue there that, we've obviously tried to address it on a temporary basis with those bumpers that are there and some of the reflectors. They did. The next time I think we could look at it is we're gonna be probably looking at City Hall Street soon for resurfacing. We could possibly look at that intersection with that project and see if there's anything we want to do with it then. Likely it's gonna come down to cost and what can be done. There would have to be right of way purchased, I think, to fix that. And it might have to be reconfigured. It probably wouldn't look anything like it does today. Ideally, you'd want the road, you'd want Nisswa Avenue coming up from 371 and City Hall Street to line up, in a, straight on, and then also be at a 90-degree to Main Street. And they're not, they're skewed, and it's, so one or the other would have to move, and
My concern is that what if there is an accident there? Would the city be liable for that?
I don't know.
Hmm. I think,
Actually, I think the reason it works as well as it does is because in general, people go through there relatively slowly.
yeah,
And, people double park in front of the post office and all this type of stuff, break every rule there is. But everybody's going relatively slow, but then there's a few people that come from the north particularly that are going faster. They're the ones that come to some accidents. So,
mhm,
but I don't know how you change that, really.
yeah,
It won't be easy, the other project we wanted to look at that kind of works into this is the alleyways. They need to be resurfaced soon too. And as you start looking at this whole thing, and because it has to work together, it becomes this big project. Well, we also, if you recall, just resurfaced Main Street in 2015. And at that time, the council didn't want to tackle sidewalks and some of these other things and drainage. They just wanted a new road surface because the old road surface was shot. At that time, it would have made more sense to have looked at the intersection and looked at the alleyways and tried to line them up better, but it just, the council at the time didn't want to go there, so. We can talk about it, we can make a recommendation here and see what the council wants to do with it. I can also put that in the agenda if you want to look at it
Mhm.
further.
I think it's worth at least putting on the agenda to talk about it.
Sure, you have the trail there, it's really busy area.
Yeah.
People trying to get in on the post office.
There's a lot that goes on at that corner.
I would say that planning for that would be would be a multiple year thing, because there'd be a lot of entities involved, the DNR, for instance, with the trail. You know, if you did have some ideas for a solution, you're gonna have a lot of interested people involved with that, and so it might take a little while to work through. And nothing says we can't start to work through some of those details, even if the project is several years out. So
Yeah.
I'll put it on the agenda and we'll go from there.
Good, thank you. Anything else? Then I think there's just this question of the month. Should we bring that up?
Yeah, so I won't mention his name, but one of the other business owners in town was driving through and we had the Crazy Day celebration, and he was noticing tents where they had stakes driven into the pavement. And like I just mentioned, we just resurfaced that in 2015. And he feels that why are we allowing, he wants to know why is the city allowing that? And I said, well, just has been allowed. We don't have a policy that prohibits it. So I'm asking is, do we want to suggest a policy to the city council prohibiting it? Or do we have alternatives to suggest for tents?
Sandbags could be used for weight instead of,
Yeah,
because if you're putting holes down in the asphalt, you're just
destroying it.
introducing an area for water to intrude into and cause a problem. I agree with that business owner.
When people do this, they just leave it after, they just pull the stake up.
Yeah.
They put usually cold patch mix back in there in the holes they create. Well, if you go look around a little bit downtown, you'll notice, you can see where those repairs are. They're not of the same quality as the original asphalt. I've never liked it, but there have been members of the council who think that allowing the tents is essential for the function of the downtown. So they haven't wanted to prohibit that or modify how the tents are placed. But I think it wouldn't hurt for this committee to suggest an alternative to that, and or
Sandbags or concrete blocks.
Another thing, if you drive through there on those days now, every year they gradually move further and further out of the street.
Mhm.
You can't hardly drive through there anymore. And people ignore the cars.
I will say this. You know, the crowd we had for Bass Lake Road last month, when we start talking about these tents. And if we're gonna be serious about prohibiting them or regulating them in some way, you're likely to have a lot of the downtown and chamber here. Which is fine, but just be aware that it'll be a little contentious, I think.
I don't particularly see a reason we can't still have the tents up, but there are alternatives, whether it's concrete blocks or sandbags. There are other ways to be able to anchor those lines other than to pound a stake into the asphalt.
I think if we do pass some kind of a policy on that, if we do it now, because they shouldn't have any more events that I'm aware of where they'll need these tents until next summer. So if we can try to work through this in the next few months and have it in place long before next summer comes, they'll be aware of it. They'll have time to get whatever modifications to tents that they rent.
I don't even see it taking a couple of months. I mean, it's a slam dunk, really. I just make a new policy about that. And, you know, the recommendation that we would make and then approve that and take it right to the council. Even with objections, I don't like to see asphalt being pounded into.
How was that resolved there by the turtle races there? I noticed it's offensive. Temporary fence.
That was put there by one of the business owners. That was supposed to be modified too. I'd have to talk to Brittany to see where we were going with that. As I understand, he was going to be, I believe, pouring concrete out to that point. And that was all gonna get modified some.
I just wondered how
I haven't gotten an update on it since it was built, so I. Yeah, it was supposed to become I thought something different. I'll check with Brittany and get an update on that, and I'll try to bring that back before next month.
Joe, what are the, I can't think of the name of them right now, but the concrete dividers that you'll see on a highway, they're about yay tall or so,
Jersey barriers,
Jersey barriers. Does the city of Nisswa own any Jersey barriers?
do not.
No, I realize that they're very heavy, but what if we took Jersey barriers and modified them to have tie-off points where tents could tie off to, or have anchors set into them where they could ratchet to, something like that, that
Mhm.
would be heavy enough to,
I think might be, it'd be nice to have some input from somebody who puts up the tents. I'd have to. I wonder, I think I've seen other ones where they have just concrete blocks that are maybe 3 by 3 and.
right? I mean, you'd have to have enough opposing force so that if a wind came up, it didn't, if it was on a sandbag, you'd have to have enough sand to withstand that force. But well, that's why I was thinking the Jersey barriers, because those are very heavy.
Problem is when you get that stuff bigger, then it damages the road.
Yeah, that's a good
Putting
point.
it in and out and so on.
So you gotta have a decent size loader. So then you gotta have drive all around.
But if we did put something down like a Jersey barrier, I know Jersey barriers are heavy, or they're gonna cause road damage as well, but if we could come up with something that we could set, we could also dictate how far those tents go out, because we're setting the corners. They're not gonna go out on the road any further than we're gonna set their corners. So we kind of kill two birds with one stone.
Yes.
There you go. I like that idea.
And you see why he works for it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But no, I mean, something like that, and I like that because it's not gonna have sharp corners where somebody hits their knee on it or something, they're gonna.
It's empty, 2 people can move it, pour the water out when you're done, less damage to the minutes.
Right.
Be now, again, storage. They're not necessarily cheap.
And yeah, and the city doesn't own any of these tents. It's either the business owners themselves or they're renting this equipment. I think most of the time they rent it.
Do we charge a fee for setting up a tent?
No, we don't. I think we have a permit now that we're looking at.
I'm just
Mostly,
wondering if that money could be used toward purchasing something like that.
I think I would rather it be the responsibility of the entity putting up the tent, although I will say our own liquor store puts up tents, does stakes too. So that's been the other problem with enforcing it. Obviously, if we're doing it, the other businesses see that.
Tom, is that an annual request by the chamber to use the public right of way?
They used to just do it.
They just do it.
And
Okay,
now
so it's kind of,
Just this last year, it got changed and
Yeah,
they did not like that.
Jenny changed it with the city administrator recently. And the city council, I believe, it changed that to where it's a permit, but I don't know that there's a fee associated with it. Or I don't know what the fee is.
Yeah.
Right.
Thank you.
It's just once a year.
The permitting process was just for that one
For
time.
the event, yeah.
Yeah, for that particular event.
Pickle might do 2, 3 of them a year. The Crazy Days is once a year. Oh, boy,
Some of them put them way out in the street.
yeah, some of them are a little more than those little 10 by 10 shade things, and then other ones are almost like a small circus tent.
Okay, so
Racks of clothes out there beyond everything.
So really what we're looking at here is some direction as to formulate a policy or something, and do we
Probably
need,
some kind of a draft policy you want to see.
yeah.
Um,
So I'd sort of like to make, if someone would make a motion for something like that, that we look at how get a policy together, a new policy about this and to formulate something. If we can get a motion like that, then maybe vote on that and then bring that at the next meeting, maybe? What would be recommended?
Are you talking about a general purpose use of city right away? Or just for this particular?
Just for this particular pounding stakes into the concrete, not do something like that, but that's what we're looking at here, I believe.
Yeah, I think for the simple way, to at least to start with, I think we want to address being able to pound the stakes into the sidewalk. But to Tom's point, we may want to actually some kind of a policy for tents or anything else placed in the city right of way for these events,
Okay.
size limits or.
Where they're placing their tents out, and I haven't been there during crazy days,
Me
but
neither.
is it an issue where they would have problem getting emergency vehicles through because they put them out so far?
So, no, what I think ends up happening is the fire department also signs off on these events that are happening. And I think that they've arranged for other ways to come and go without going through there to downtown.
But there are, I mean, some of those get close enough to where it becomes a safety issue. If people out on the fringes.
Yep.
If we're gonna be on floor or things like that, you know, picking through stuff, they aren't paying any attention to cars. Not a bit.
It's a lot like it's a lot like the intersection. I don't have a good alternative to suggest, or at least I haven't.
Well, something like that, really, I mean, it's bad. And why not just shut down the road?
We've talked about that idea as well.
That's what I'm wondering, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, they're obviously not taking care of anything, you know.
The business owners don't like that idea because they lose all their parking then. They feel they're leaving some, I avoid being here during crazy days. So I don't know how they're parking with all of this in the way, but
Yeah, it seems to me, what I remember seeing was that it's just all tents and there was no parking there in the downtown area anyway. So it was mainly just parking in the fringes and they walk in. Sort of like a county fair.
certainly that's another idea we can talk about is closing. And I know it's come up in other committees as far as closing Main Street, and at least to this point, it has been resisted. I think the only time it may have ever happened was when we had the Governor's Fishing opener. They closed down part of Main Street. And they didn't really establish a policy for that. It was the council directly
Mhm.
allowed it.
Well, I'll make a motion, Mark, that Tom come up with something for the state from anyway. That's kind of an interim into general public use.
I'll second that.
I think it'll expand to probably Brittany's department, maybe the parks, and I would guess Jenny will probably will try to get the chamber's opinion on it, but I will try to get a draft put together for our next meeting, and if I can't, I'll tell you why not.
Okay. Okay, so we have a motion and a second on that. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay, carried.
Are all corners of those tent stakes put down in the asphalt, or some of them put up onto the dirt, or?
So far, I think they're anchored probably to their building in some way, and on one side, and then on the street side, I think they drive the stakes down.
Okay.
I haven't seen any out in the grass with this particular event, although they do drive them into the park close to the chamber, and they hit our irrigation lines. with
That
those.
was my next question.
As a
Do we
committee?
have anything underground?
Oh,
that
here?
those Stakes, 'cause some of
It
those
wasn't
stakes
too
could
bad.
be 2 feet
We
long.
did have a lot of
We've had to repair.
open forum
irrigation.
How far down?
Correct.
Is septic and
We
water?
voted to go
and
ahead
electric
and,
and
They'll
cable?
never hit septic or water. 'cause they're 8 feet
that
down.
Okay,
the
good.
builder has to make a grade there and retain
Are there
the
any
right of
connections
way
that are high
for
enough?
potential road connection. And that got carried.
The thing I would be most concerned about is any
Yeah, it's pretty contentious,
electric.
but
I guess,
Would be the main ones, or maybe telephone. That would be shallow too.
my recommendation would be that any ground point anchor wouldn't be able to go into the ground. I mean, if they're anchoring.
I
to a
think what
building
we
or
should
something,
do
that's
right
one
now
thing, 'cause
though
that's
is,
elevated,
we can talk some more later on, but let's go ahead and adjourn.
that it
here.
should be-
Do we have a motion to adjourn? Second, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay, we are adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I know some of that, they're bound also by the Gopher State. If they're gonna drive something into the ground, they have to call Gopher State.